sorry, yes, it did. Yes.
Yes, I was sorry not to be able to be there, but Lyle brought me up to speed. Very impressive, apparently, your new CE.
Yes, and it was very, it was wonderful to see so many from Taupo bring them over. It's lovely sort of handover, if you know what I mean.
Right. Okay, I better shut up now.
You're making your way through the draft government policy statement. A bit of light reading, wasn't it?
Oh, gosh. Yep.
First one's on Zoom. Okay. All right, we've gone 9:30. I call this meeting of the Regional Public Transport Committee to order. Please, if you've got your phones, just put them on silent or off. I've done mine, so it's good. And health and safety, we all meet over the other side of the road if there's an earthquake or some emergency. Make our way out. There's exit, and the toilets are out around the foyer. So just regarding live streaming, I'll just remind members and staff that the public section of this meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and that the recordings will be made available to the Bay of Plenty Regional Council website following the meeting. I remind all present that local government decision-making affords no protection to councillors, council officers, and the public for comments made during the meetings that are subsequently challenged in a court of law and determined to be slanderous. That's that. Just of note, NZTA Whakakotahi has a new member, being Susan Collins. And did you tell me Susan's on?
She is an apology.
She is an apology today, but her alternate, Sarah Roberts, is on Zoom, and we've got Sarah Hosted as well on Zoom. Is she on Zoom? She'll be joining us later from NZTA. So there'll be two. So the apologies I've got is Susan Collins, Councillor Isles, and then on Zoom we have Sarah Roberts, Councillor Thurston, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Nees, Councillor O'Brien, and that's all. Are there any other apologies? There have been none. Can someone move that? That's moved, seconded. Shirley, Campbell and Shirley moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. There is no public forum today. There are no items on the agenda that are not on the agenda, I don't think. Order of business, there is no change. Are there any conflicts of interest to be declared? There are none. The public excluded business to be transferred to the open. Is there any? There's nothing that we have so far. So we move to confirmation of the minutes of the meeting of the 14th of November 2023. Would somebody like to move that they be taken as a true record, please? Anybody read the minutes? Councillor Shirley moved. I'll second. All in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Are there any Any discussion on the previous minutes? Okay. We then move straight into the presentations, and we're doing the report first. So I call Mike. Are you going to open this up with Stuart, or is Stuart going to do it?
Kia ora, everyone. Stuart will lead out in terms of the Arataki report and some of the detail. This is our quarterly summary of public transport performance, and we'll welcome any questions. Please let us know if there's any feedback about the report itself. We're really keen to understand if we're delivering you the right information in the right sort of format and whatnot. So, Stuart.
Just before you start, Stuart, this is a really good news story from the statistics, and we need to shout it from the rooftops. So well done, staff and operators. It's right across the region that we've had a substantial lift. Stuart, leave it to you.
Morena tātou. I'll just utilise the mode here. Which one is it? You have to move that over, Claudia. The next slide. This isn't working. So certainly a good news story, and it's a great way to start off with this presentation. Thank you. We all work hard to deliver safe, efficient, timely, resilient public transport for the community, and fantastic to see a significant uptake. So there in the patronage summary, positive patronage growth continues for the region. You can see that for our quarter ending December, quite an increase against the previous year. So the region's bus services report an increase of 35.4% on the same quarter last year. And that's certainly something that we are noticing through feedback through the operators and our observations with the online, with what we can view through cameras and what we see with our own eyes, the uptake of the buses and across the Bay of Plenty, which is fantastic. The increase also in passenger trips in total mobility has seen quite an increase as well, by 31.1% on the same quarter last year, as shown on that right-hand table. And there are some reasons for the increases to the positive impacts on increased patronage from obviously the Community Connect implementation on 1 July last year, where we saw an uplift, increased trips with a move back to 90% timetable, and also some minor network improvements. Some possible contributing factors to increased patronage would include the pressure, I guess, and increased paid parking in the CBD, fuel costs and cost of living. But that's certainly a good news story, and we get some really good feedback on how well that's going with patronage. Just moving to the next slide. Again, still a good news story. Urban patronage increase on the prior year. Tauranga 36%, interregional 34%, Western Network 26%, Rotorua 17%, and Eastern Network 17%. Again, an uptake across the board there. And in school services, you can see that for the second quarter, a big jump up. And you can see also where free travel at all times was introduced in July last year. And that's had an effect on usage. We are certainly noting the increase in school services patronage and the increased demand. Year-to-date patronage by different types, as outlined on the graph on the right. Year on year, next slide, thank you, Claudia. Tells a similar story. Again, an uplift, an uptake on using the public transport network, and at the end of the day, it's a better way to travel. It's cost less, it's comfortable, and you can enjoy the ride into town, wherever you're going. Next slide on accessible transport. Later on today, you'll hear some actual quotes from some users who utilise these services as part of the presentation. And you can see that we had 27,233 total mobility trips taken during the quarter, an increase of 8.5% on the previous quarter. So these are the people that are picked up from door to door that can't walk down the road and get onto a bus, that have significant mobility issues. 4,723 active registered total mobility scheme users as of 31st of December, and 422 new applications received in the December quarter. And the chart at the bottom, the total mobility contract cost, so we simply change this around to make it a little bit more easier to follow, and that shows the funding share, I guess, how it's composed of a local share, the SURF funding, and Waka Kotahi's funding, which is the highest one at the top. And if anyone's noticed in the government's policy statement, there's reference to SURF funding for total mobility remaining, which is really reassuring.
Can you just explain to the room what SURF funding is?
Well, that SURF funding is through a different, my understanding, through a different fund, through the Climate Emergency Relief Fund. I could be seen to be corrected. And I guess it's from a different bucket, so to speak. Director Seaborn, you might articulate that better than me, but.
The SURF funding comes from a different funding source in terms of Waka Kotahi, and it's a different funding stream, but all in total, it increases the proportion of central government funding to local share. And I think that's the main message to take away there. And as Stu said, that it's confirmed through the new GPS is continuing for as long as that policy setting remains.
And the chart at the top that has that shows the 31,000 accessibility concession trips, easy way to remember that is simply the yellow bit reflecting the B card usage, and those concessions are loaded onto the B cards for those people that again can't drive, but can get to a bus stop and avail themselves of that service. So that's again good news and good uptake. And you'll hear more in some more detail on this later on today through Mary Norris. Customer experience, fairly straightforward. I'd point out that, the 5 top Tauranga routes with missed trips are obviously very busy ones. Route 55, 40, number 1, Bayfair, Mount Maunganui, Tauranga, number 60, and number 5. When we look at the public transport tickets, matters that come to us by way of a query from the public, 31% so the complaints make up 7.6%, which isn't a great deal. And out of those, 31% of them relate to traffic congestion, roadworks, that type of thing. I think it demonstrates to an extent that the driving public, and the travelling public in general become conditioned to some of the delays in the network, and it does happen. Just moving to,
Just before you finish that, if we go back to that last slide, when you look at the missed trips, it's interesting to note that sort of mirrors the patronage figures of different routes as well, doesn't it? Because the 55 is the busiest route patronage wise. So just because it's got a lot more missed trips, it's because it has a lot more trips in total. Is that correct?
That's correct, and it also travels a long distance, that route. And if you see that the total of missed trips only makes up 2.7% out of 73,000 scheduled trips. So we're still well within what's an acceptable limit, I guess, when it comes to missed trips. And final slide on financial performance. So this is a financial summary and forecast for 6 months ending the 31st of December last year. Operational revenue, this is all sources including targeted rates, funding from Waka Kotahi, and our fare box recovery is on track. Operational expenditure, this relates to the timings of costs arriving as well. So you may wonder why expenditure might be down, and it simply comes down to the time of the year when we expect certain costs to come in. And this relates, of course, this report to the last quarter of last year. And of course, indexation, got a little chart there. You can see how indexation, so this is really what it costs to the continual increase of costs when it comes to fuel and other factors that have to be taken into account when we are negotiating with the operators, and these constantly move up. A bit of a pause in June 23, I'm not sure why that is. A jump in it, and things seem to plateau out a bit. However, it is an ongoing story, isn't it, Mike?
Just to add to that, our contracts are structured such that we take the risk on inflation. So we pay a base contract cost plus indexation. And so we monitor this fairly closely because that's where our exposure lies with regard to our contracts. So it's good to see that from the main two drivers are indexation costs around fuel and labour. And so as those two metrics move up and down, our costs increase. At this stage, we've been able to both our forecasts for that and our revenue being made up of funding plus fair revenue, we've accounted for that. So we're on track from that regard. But again, it's something that we always keep an eye on because it stops us from doing new things. Whilst we may be able to afford what we do now, doing new things becomes more difficult because inflation takes the contingency out of the system. So it's sort of an important dynamic in our financials to note. And also just to roll back a little bit, there's a chart, a table in the Arataku report around fare box recovery, and you well know from the new GPS statement that our new sort of policy settings are going to cause us to focus on the commerciality of the service and what our fare box recovery is. So just keeping an eye on that. Our fare box recovery has improved significantly over the last 3 years. So we're now in a much better place than we were, particularly out of post-COVID. And we're awaiting what Waka Kotahi's reaction will be around the settings we will need to achieve through fare box recovery. So we're on a good trend. We don't know where the target is just yet, but just to compare, we're probably at in my view, the lower end of what fare box recovery looks like across other organisations. So in and around that sort of 14.5%, up by 4.2. I think there are some councils that run at 20, but there's also quite a few councils that are below that. So we're running kind of just behind the middle of the pack, I think, with regard to that. But I think what we'll need to await is what's the expectations from central government around what we're looking to achieve as a driver here. So that'll come through once the GPS has been consulted and we get an opportunity to question Waka Kotahi around the expectations for funding.
Can I just ask a question then on that issue of fare box recovery? Because in our draft consultation pack, which is now out, but I haven't seen it, the final version, but for the urban public transport systems, that's Wakatani, Rotorua and Tauranga for the urban ones, there was a total total cost of 40.54 million. And we're only picking 2.28 million through the fares, which is only 6%. That's according to the LTP. So that looks a little. Was the draft that came out. Has that been updated, or is that still accurate? Or
I know that won't be. That was accurate at the time. That was possibly 6 months ago that chart was put together. So we've had 2 quarters since then, which things are changing. So as you can see, how dynamic it is and has been over the last wee while. So it's more improved than we're expected and through the LTP. But just bear in mind, there's a relationship here. Our costs go up, and we collect more revenue at the same time. So it is pleasing. But what we're looking at is that relationship between cost and revenue, and how do we always be more efficient about how we spend money, but also collecting that revenue as well. So there's a few dynamic things in here that could explain that, which I could go into great detail, but I won't.
no,
Happy to talk about it in more detail later.
Thank you for that, and recognise that this last quarter has seen substantial uptakes across the country, 35.4% up. So yes, understood. Can I just recognise Mayor Tapsell, who's joined us on Zoom. Nice to see you, Mayor. And you've just got your new CEO in place, I believe.
Yes, just yesterday, our new Chief Executive, Andrew Moraes, had his very first day. So I'm looking forward to bringing him along sometime in future so that we can introduce him to you all.
Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Big congratulations to the staff, especially for the reward for their efforts and the increase in patronage, and that's quite impressive. And it looks like it's increasing at a faster rate every time we mark it. Can I ask if there's an ability to graph or map the corresponding drop in congestion in your roading issues in the mornings and the evenings as the bus patronage goes up? Is there a same droppage in your congestion, even if it's partially?
Short answer is no. I'd love to say there was, but it's a very difficult thing to correlate and create and understand the causation. I think the best mechanism we have is there's principles around this, and we use them as a way of showing that actually that there is an implication for the transport system. But it is so dynamic, the transport system, i.e. by corridor, by time of day, by kind of trips you use, to be able to say that increased patronage on the PT network results in that much less congestion is very difficult to prove apart from on certain locations. You could do it on one location, but you certainly would find it very hard to do it as an overall. But best practice does show that the increasing amount of patronage does have an impact on the transport system as a whole. In generalities, you can work out a general effect. It's very difficult to make it very specific. That's as far as I'm going to go with that.
That's all I have to.
Thanks very much, Chair, and really just picking up on Councillor Dennis's query. I think, like you, that this is a remarkable increase in public transport patronage, and the story needs to be told. And I'm also quite keen to get under the bonnet a little bit more as to what might be actually driving this. I know that we've got the information of the return to, best part of the full timetable, but also the SURF funding that came through, and it's easy to put it down to that. But I'm just looking at the chart that's on page 21 for the Tauranga network in the bottom right-hand corner, which shows the patronage of Tauranga over the last 24 months. And it seems that the pickup in the slope of that line occurred at the beginning of 2023, which was in fact before the full timetable and before the SURF funding. And it looks to me, particularly if you look at the orange line, which is the urban, that line started sloping quite early in 2023, and then, if anything, dropped away a little bit after that return to schools peak in February, March. So it would be interesting to understand actually what's driving this, because we are at risk now with SURF funding being pulled under the new GPS, that we'll end up going back down again. And I'm keen to determine whether or not actually that was the key driver, or whether or not we are seeing a genuine shift. Because if we are, that's exactly what we need, a long-term shift. And it may well be the congestion and other factors that are driving a bit of a behaviour shift in the population. That's what we'd love to see. Not that we like congestion, but the behaviour shift we certainly would love to see. So I don't know if there's any staff resources available, Mike, but I do think it would be worthwhile someone, an analyst, maybe getting under the bonnet a little bit more to see if we can determine what actually the impact of those key milestones, if you like, actually had, and whether or not there was some other driver underpinning the increase. And the other stat, pardon me, the other stat that I think would be worthwhile knowing, and I don't know how possible this is mode share. The report tells us about public transport, but what we're really trying to achieve is a shift in mode share. And it would be great if we could actually understand that metric. Anecdotally, on some of the trips that I travel, and I'm a frequent user of the road network in the morning, particularly from the Mount to the city, anecdotally congestion has relieved. Certainly on that trip. The evening peak seems to be different, and it's not getting any better in the evening. So having better understanding of actually, and I know Western Bay, looking at Merdenia, Western Bay has its own story, which is not a good one. But understanding some of the key routes and corridors and mode shift would actually be quite beneficial to us understanding what actions, what levers we need to pull to keep on driving this change through. But my key point is I do think we need to get out with a story about this patronage change because it's really quite positive.
The disappointing thing is we don't have a member of the media present, but we can certainly we can be proactive on that, and it is a great story.
Happy to respond to some of that through you, Mr. Chair. Just to pick them off one by one. Yes, I think as far as a positive story, a contextual story for the transport system, great idea. We're happy to try and make that happen if we can. And one of the key parts for us is what drives patronage, and it's a bit of the dark art of transport economics a bit, and that reliability, the price of the fare, the price of fuel, the convenience of the trip are all factors, and they kick in at different levels of demand. And that's why it becomes so dynamic and sometimes tough to figure out. I think for some of these things, the price of fuel and the price of those fares have had an impact on that patron. So in combination, and I don't know how much in combination, they're having an impact on how people choose to travel. So that is known, it's best practice. How much of an impact is difficult to determine, particularly in a small locale like our city, because we don't collect granular data enough with regard to that. It's not to say that we can't sort of try and understand it more, and we want to understand more because they represent levers we can pull or not. So that's one of the reasons we're quite keen to chase some of that down. But I think one of the key aspects that come through these statistics is around reliability. So you'll see us sort of defend things, particularly infrastructure investment, that improve our reliability, because we know it's money in the bank for us. And we know that patronage is based on those sorts of things. So we have a graphic equalizer of response, and we have to tune all these dials to our location. So those are the sorts of underpinning principles that drive that patronage number. But I do think in particularly the last 12, 18 months, the impact of the fares and it being free and or cheap for people, but also fuel price. I think that's also having an impact. There is a point though when the network becomes so congested, people flee to other modes because they're sick and tired of the one they're on. And so there's some of that happening in parts of the system at different times and whatnot. But it's got to be better than what they're currently using. So what we will do is we'll look at what's happening across New Zealand, because those things are true for New Zealand as they are true for us. And we can, without too much effort, give you a view of what the context across New Zealand is, and Waka Kotahi track that kind of thing, so the information is readily available. As far as mode share goes, again, the annual journey to work surveys and whatnot are our traditional means of understanding that, and they come out periodically. And so again, without real world data, it's not tracked in real time, unfortunately. I think that is a challenge for people who plan for transport, is how do we get that information more quickly? And we can't right now. It's very difficult. But again, I'm happy to explore it. Technology's moved on, data sources are different. And I know that Waka Kotahi will look at this all the time, and we'll lean on the 800-pound gorilla of data collection. That is that organisation that would to help us. But at the same time, we'll look at our own stats, but we don't necessarily collect that information directly.
Daniel.
Well, I agree. It's a good news story. So well done, everyone. But perhaps it's going to be an unfair question, but do you see that trend continuing? And I'm noting that this data is almost a quarter the year old already, and also noting that there seems to be a regular December, January seasonal fluctuation anyway. So are you aware whether the start of 24 has seen a significant further uptick, down from a slight low in December last year?
I'll take the unfair question on. It is a crystal ball gazing exercise to some degree. I think post-COVID, the way that transport demand and price works in New Zealand was fundamentally changed. We've gone through a period of economic surge and then a pullback. So the contextual factors are influencing how people use travel. So that's all at play now, and I think we can all sense it because it's affecting our daily lives, and so that's the case. However, from COVID as the lowest point, we are still improving back to where we were, and then above. That makes sense if you strip away all the short-term factors in a growing city, in an area where people are moving to, and there's increased demand for travel. Full stop. So that the background pressure in our system, transport system and land use and otherwise, is the growth story. So related to that, it will improve in line with that over that time. So whatever those forces, how they have an effect on that growth will translate straight into the transport system, because the transport system's the plumbing of the economy, and that demand profile will probably track with that growth profile quite closely. So that's the macro view. Micro view, I don't know.
The Powerbuy data portal that we use for patronage that comes through virtual, might be a day behind, but virtual, shows that the first 2 months, January, February, of this year, the trend has remained upwards. So we don't have it. This report is quarterly, so it's not in that, but it is looking positive. Councillor McMillan, have you got a question?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and it may you may want to park it till the later paper, but you mentioned the free fares and cheap fares having a definite impact or near definite. I'm just really still unclear on whether there is a sweet spot with concession fares versus free fares, and do we have research and data on that? Because I'd hate to shoot ourselves in the foot with potentially moving on to not free fares, only to find out that then we reduce patronage. And do we have sort of conclusive evidence that concession fares there is a sweet spot where a price is low enough that it's negligible to be free? Or what does that look like, and do we have data on that?
I'm happy to jump in there. I think it's more about price than fares and the impact of a price on an individual's demand for travel. So is that number, that price, is that much easier and better for you than your alternative? So what's happening in your context, i.e. fuel price and the cost of travel versus the price that you get on the bus? And there's a certain point where you get so low, it has no effect. Like the price is just so low, it's not even, doesn't affect you'll just choose the bus every time. If the price gets too high, it's much more convenient and cost effective to take your vehicle. So there's a sort of there's a scale in there. So there is a sweet spot, and unfortunately with passenger transport, it's different everywhere. It's different in every city. And that's what the kind of work that we do in the fares review that's coming up is to really unpack that. What's that price point that has an implication on patronage? So patronage at a certain price point declines. That is known right across the world. It is a price elasticity. Then there's a part below that, which is sort of the sweet spot as you've referred to it. But that price point is contextual, i.e. what does it cost you to travel, and what is your environment telling you around that? So there's that. But don't forget there's other factors that play on that. that is a one-to-one relationship, and it's not the only way patronage gets affected. So that's just one element. So I hope that answers the question.
Okay, thank you.
It's a presentation, we don't have to move it, so thank you very much for your presentation, Stuart, and pass on to your staff across the whole region. This is a really good news story, and can we please make sure that we get effective comms out on that. We move now to the chairman's report, and are we starting with a direct update or?
Yeah, so just wanted to briefly talk about the GPS and its change. So quite clearly, the landscape has changed for Transport New Zealand. The new central government has changed the settings and the way it invests in transport, and that's outlined in the GPS. We've created a summary paper, which we've sent to all members of this committee, as well as the Regional Transport Committee, and that'll go out this afternoon, which will sort of summarise our reading of the GPS, particularly with regard to passenger transport and the services here. And there's quite a bit of reading there, and I'd encourage you to have a look at it, both the GPS and our summary of. But in terms of what we're looking at here is quite clearly the environment is softening from investment, particularly in PT infrastructure space around that funding that would have come from central government. However, the passenger transport service function, the operational element, is largely the same and accounting for growth over time. So there doesn't seem to be a regression from the indicated funding, and it's all indicated for passenger transport operations, but perhaps concentrating on the major urban areas for passenger transport infrastructure. So what that means for us is that our services and our aspirations for growing the service, now we need to go and have a look at what the actual implication is. We were planning and looking at a step change in potential levels of service at some point to accommodate the growth in the area. We'll just need to work out what the implications for that. So we'll come back to you with what that might look like from a financial profile over 10 years perspective. And so we'll come back to that. I think the idea here is for us to let you know about this particular policy change, but the Regional Transport Committee is probably the right vehicle for us to make a submission on the GPS. And I'd encourage you to work through that committee in order to make sure if any concerns there are that you have that you'd like to express through the region and via the region, and the Transport Committee is the right sort of mechanism to do that. And really that's it. There's a couple of things in here around, from our perspective, the commerciality of our services will come into more focus. How we're driving efficiency in our particularly expenditure profiles and the revenue aspect to that. We'll need more detail around that to understand that more. What those settings are, they have not been determined yet, but we'll grapple them up once they come out. But I think it's a change for us around what's important for us to track, understand, and then perhaps, as Commissioner Selwood was inferring earlier, the levers we have to pull to adapt to that change. So that being the case, I won't say too much more before I tie myself in knots. And I'd encourage you to read the summary document and the GPS in conjunction.
So staff, Ollie, are you leading out on this? Stuart.
We have the chairperson's report for the Public Transport Committee. If the chairperson's report can be accepted as read, I would like to point out just a few aspects of the report for your awareness. One is in respect to Tauranga schools and the increase in demand for schools, which is a pressure point of sorts. It's a problem, but a good problem. And it shows that I think parents are inclined to put their children on the buses instead of adding to the mix of driving them around everywhere. Another part of the report is in respect to procurement and some of the work that we're doing there. And the third part I'd bring to your attention is around our on-demand project, which kicks off very soon. So there's quite a lot of information put into the chairperson's report at this time, 2.5 pages, and it's a really good story that's being told, and there'll be an opportunity during our break to actually get outside and have a look at the on-demand van and to meet the operators and have some conversation. So if there's any content in the chairperson's report that you'd like expanded on, then either of myself or my colleagues can do that.
Councillor Thompson, welcome.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. I note that the transport team is to do a full review of school services later this year. So can you tell me how that will dovetail with the fare review? Because I have to say, it is my view that the free fares, concession fares, etc., should all be wrapped up in this total review of school services and fare review, and should be consulted on. So I'm just keen to understand, will the timing of the school services review and the fare review dovetail? Thank you.
Through you, Chair, yes, they will. Both of those reviews are programmes to progress through this calendar year. So the fares review will be considering the fare on school services, and that standalone school services review will look at the integration or separation of those services with the urban network. So to your question, Councillor Thompson, yes.
So just a supplement to her question, when would we expect the fares review to be complete by? Will it be complete by the end of the year, or is, what's the timing for this?
We're targeting this calendar year.
Thank you. I have Councillor Nees and then Mayor Daniel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions. There's a comment that extensions have been requested for school contracts. Could one of the staff advise what length extension has been applied for, and is it the same for all services or is it staggered?
Through you, Chair. The school services are being extended by 2+2, so we're extending for the first 2 years and then looking for a potential second year. The other extensions are bespoke, depending on when the contract finishes, giving us enough time to start our procurement program, which we are just kicking off at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Also, the on-demand trial, you mentioned that it will be measured against objectives, but there's no indication of what the objectives actually are that we're using to measure its success. So I just wonder if staff could give an indication. Is it patronage, customer satisfaction, cost effectiveness, timeliness, all of the above, or is there other criteria as well?
Through you, Mr. Chair and Councillor Nees, the objectives are listed on page 39 of the report, and customer satisfaction, patronage, accessibility, and a cost benefit analysis at the end in terms of the cost being, it's achieved a good benefit cost ratio at the end. So those are the key elements of what we need to measure for the service.
Right, thank you. I overlooked that. I also want to comment about Councillor Thompson's concern that we need to integrate all of our decisions on fares. I'm very concerned that we're considering fare papers today when in our action plan we are indicating that we make decisions on our fares in our long-term plan. And of course, we're already out with our long-term plan consultation. So I'm just signalling that when we get to those papers, I'm going to be asking what is the basis assumptions in the long-term plan for our fare structure, so that I can make further comments regarding that. It just seems like we've got an ad hoc paper today with already out with a long-term plan. We talk about fare reviews and service level reviews, and it doesn't feel integrated to me. And we've got the GPS coming through, and we know that there may be some levers the government's wanting to push there. So I'm just really concerned about the timing of the papers that we're going to be considering.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to address part of that question now, and then we can have a more fulsome conversation later. Just to give you some timing, June was when the free fares policy was implemented by central government. Our new government has given us a deadline around the retraction of that policy. In between times, we had an LTP to create and then publicly release. So I think we're a bit of a victim of timing of policy around us as well. So whilst it might appear to be not integrated, we are reacting to the context and the situation. And we're more than happy to have that discussion around what council's intent is with regard to the paper that's been presented to you. And I think that debate will be a good one. One of the elements here is that we've prepared the proposal on the back of one, responding to that central government directive. Two, the assumptions that were put into the LTP around that original directive, which was we are assuming that that funding was going to be in place for at least the end of the financial year. That it has not played out and is not true, and we have some consequence to talk about. But staff have prepared a paper in with these assumptions in mind, and are very happy to sort of discuss the implications for that for our communities and customers. Molly, did you want to add something there?
Through you, Chair, I just wanted to acknowledge that over the past 18 to 24 months, there's been significant policy from central government, which has forced our hand on certain decisions around fares. And we've had to be relatively reactive in the face of central government direction. What we are anticipating is moving to a period of more stability, where the government is likely to set its expectations, but the onus will be on us to determine what direction we want to take things in terms of our overall fare strategy. I know the fares review, regional fares review, has been on the books for a while, but due to that sort of direction from central government, we have delayed that process till now. But now we're expecting to reach that stability. We feel it's the right time to go on that journey, have that conversation, fold in the direction that we're getting from central government, fold in the feedback that we get through the LTP process to then determine what the way forwards is for us as a region.
Thank you, staff. The batting order will be Mayor Denyer, Councillor Shirley, Councillor Thurston. But can I, just in defence of the staff on the fares review, I mean, I commend that it has not been easy for our staff. That the playing field has altered at short notice several times in the last couple of years, and they have to adapt really fast, and that makes for complications with our contractor, who needs time for updating routes and costings, and it is a very difficult job. So they do not take these decisions to look at something lightly, and the fares one that the tertiary fares that you're talking about today are as a result of a review by the tertiary providers who instigated that, and then we've been asked to look at things, which we will do later on in the day. But I think staff have been very constrained in how they can perform because of the rapidly changing circumstances. But anyway, that's me. So I'm going to go for Mayor Denyer, Councillor Shirley, Councillor Thurston, in that order.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I had a question around the assertions of overcrowding on the school service. And it was put to me some time ago, actually, that there was a large uptake for school buses at the start of the school year, but overcrowding means that parents revert to driving children in cars. So first the question is, does the data bear this out? And if so, can we not plan for this? Because we really do want students to be taking buses instead of parents congesting the roads, taking everyone individually. So does the data bear that out, and can we plan for it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I might answer the question in reverse. In terms of can we plan for it? The last year we put on an extra 6 buses actually at the start of the year, which we carried through to this particular period. We worked pretty heavily with our schools around their roll numbers before the school term started. And we got the impression, and sometimes no impression, on the numbers of students that were going to be utilising our service. And so we carried that extra capacity through to this year and found that it wasn't enough. And so it's a situation that we've grappled again with this year, and that we'll move to resolve. We did line up our operators and had planning around if that eventuated, what would we do? And we have a plan around that. But it's a tricky situation for us. And part of the school's review is actually dealing with that surge and that information gap that we have at times. So how do we create a contingency? The other thing is, if you look at the demand profile, and then to answer your first part of the question, the demand for travel, particularly on passenger transport, is always more in the start of the year and it drops off towards the end. So we have a curve that looks like that, and our passenger transport services, particularly with schools, because their travel demand is quite different from a commuter demand. They're a different kind of customer. So we kind of have to plan for just below that peak. And we always know that the first bout of rain reduces our patronage through summer, and then there's a winter level that we achieve at some point. So we're walking that line between how much should we do and whatnot. Do we know for sure that people transfer into cars and take their kids to school? We don't collect that data directly. It's more anecdotal in terms of some of the feedback we get. But I guess from our perspective is we aim to make sure that the problem does exist and it's a sustained problem. And then we should react with more expenditure, more buses in order to cope with that. So there is a bit of tensioning in this conversation, and that's the right thing to do for us, rather than having buses that we do not need in 3 months' time.
So the question is, by providing capacity for just under the peak at the beginning of the year, are we causing that decline later in the year?
I think the evidence bears out that there's always going to be a decline, whether we make that move or not. We do have an impact on the slope of that curve, though. So there is an impact from what we do. And yes, we probably do shift people across. However, that would happen anyway. So whether we reacted or not, there's always a decline out of summer, and winter is just quieter with regard to people using buses.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. My question's essentially been answered. Councillor Neves raised the issue of the on-demand project, and I think it's been covered. Thank you.
Just so you know, morning tea is due within a quarter of an hour, and we will go. There is one of the new on-demand buses is parked outside, and we've got representatives, I believe, of the operator Ritchie's and Mercury Energy who are sponsoring part of this work. Who will be out there, so we will be able to either take a cup of tea first or go out there first and come back and then grab a cup of tea and bring it to the table might be the way to go. But that, just so you know, that'll be within the next quarter of an hour. Councillor Thurston, you don't get that privilege, but you can.
But I certainly won't keep you from your morning tea. I won't keep you from your morning tea, Chairman. So, but no, speaking to your Chairman's report, I know there's a paper coming up shortly on total mobility, but this is for popping corks, I believe. It's a cause for celebration. As you've heard me on many occasions say, 1 in 5 people in Tauranga have a profound disability, and it's news to celebrate, I firmly believe. So that's all I wanted to say about total mobility, but acknowledging there's a paper coming up. I totally concur with Councillor Neves and Councillor Thompson. I know we're reacting and having to recent government directives, but I think integration is going to be the key word going forward with the school services, the standalone school services, discussions re fares, and the regional fare review, which Oliver said is going to take place this calendar year. But I'll be vehemently fighting to consult on all those aspects when they're effectively rolled out. But just on the subject of the Tauranga South on-demand trial, there's going to be huge changes here for that community, with conventional fixed routes being adjusted or deleted to accommodate it. So can I just have another reassurance from you, Michael, and the team that there's a major comms strategy going to be built all around this to sell it to those particular unique communities?
Again, the short answer is yes. I think one of the key parts about comms is that it's targeting the right people at the right time for that service. And so we've put a great deal of thought in that. So our comms campaign is very much about highlighting the need, how to use it, what you have to do, and all those detailed questions around a new service, because it is new. It's a new way of doing things, as well as a new service as well. So yes is the short answer.
And as we know, there's going to be a lot of technology, and for a lot of these people, it's going to be new technology for them. So my big fear is that it could be set up to fail, because as you know, a number of us have fought long and hard to have this trial. So that's all I'd like, as Councillor Winters would say, end of message.
Commissioner.
Yeah, thank you. Can I just ask through you, the Tauranga Phase 2 refresh, what's the timeline for that? Because I'm thinking that we've just opened Cameron Road through the Tauranga Public Transport Committee, Joint Committee. We discussed the opening of the dedicated bus lanes at Peak. And it would be really good to see the integration of the more frequent Phase 2 refresh and that whole kind of corridor operating, and potentially as an opportunity to lift that patronage to another level. We've invested several $100 million now in that corridor, really keen to leverage it.
Through you, Chair, the Tauranga Phase 2 refresh, as put to this committee, I think it was 6 months ago now, is subject to funding through the Regional Council LTP and the RLTP process. So that is awaiting funding. Staff are looking at elements of the refresh and what could potentially be delivered without the need for further investment. But there are no timescales that I can give you today, other than staff are looking to progress it through the course of this year.
So if I could just clarify, Chair, the timing for the LTP process to be complete and then decisions made about the funding, if I could get some sort of understanding of that, and then what might be the expected kind of implementation phase, assuming that you had the funding in place?
So the LTP process will conclude by mid this year. Currently from NZTA, although NZTA colleagues on the call are welcome to clarify if there's any further information available, we're looking at NLTF funding confirmed September of this year. Whether or not we would get prior notice, so projects could progress, given that there is a delay to the NLTF process, I'm not sure. In terms of progressing that work, I'm not able to give you any firm dates, other than staff will look to progress work once we understand what resources are available to deliver it.
I just note, Chair, that I will have been a commissioner in Tauranga for 3.5 years when we leave in June, and this project has been on the books since that time. So I do think it, especially now that the investment is made, I do think it needs some priority.
So that's sounds like it's the end of the chairman's report. So I'm happy to move that we receive the report. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Campbell. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. That means we move to morning tea, and which I don't think's here yet, but just coming in now. that's okay. I would suggest that we actually go out and look at the on-demand bus, do that first, and then come back, because if we take too long, then we'll bring our morning tea back to the table. We'll just see how we go for time. So we'll adjourn now for morning tea. The plan is to be back here by 11:20. So for those online, so you'll get a bit of a break because we're going to take some time out to look at this bus. So 11, if you can be back close to 11:15, that would even be better. Thank you. Yeah, look, I had said to come back at 15:15 and it's a little bit before that. I'm just hoping, you see, we've got Nees and Thurston at least. Who else are we waiting for online? We want to just keep the meeting moving if we can. Those online, we had a very good look at these on-demand buses. Vans, should I say, they are pretty attractive, and there's plenty of headroom, and I think they'll be a huge success. So there you go. And thanks to Mercury Energy as well for funding the electric side of the infrastructure and the power. So that's should be noted. We are now at 10 past, so I think we will make a start on 9.2, which is the Regional Public Transport Plan. After we've done that, we're going to move to 9.5 because Councillor Thompson has to leave early and she wants to be part of that discussion, and as I think that's reasonable. So we'll do that after 9.2. So anyone else on the online? O'Brien. Is Councillor O'Brien online?
He's possibly away from his desk.
Councillor O'Brien, are you online? Not yet. He's the only voting.
Andrew.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lyle here. I'll give him just start. I'll give him a call on my phone.
Oh, good boy. Okay. Thank you. All right, Bron, we'll ask you to start with this presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, members in person and online. So this item is on the Regional Public Transport Plan, Draft Action Plan, which is a bit of a mouthful. Just the background to this piece of work is that the current operative RPTP commits to developing an implementation plan for the policies and actions contained within. So this draft action plan has been developed to meet this requirement, and I guess its key purpose really is to provide a structured approach to implementation of the plan leading into our next review cycle. I won't dwell too much on the governance and management arrangements. It's really there just to provide clarity and certainty. Obviously, recommending that the PTC is the governance body overseeing the implementation of the RPTP. As a joint governance body, it has that capacity to provide oversight of both services and infrastructure, which are covered in the plan as required by the Land Transport Management Act. So obviously of interest to all the local authorities in the region. There'll be regular reporting back to this committee on implementation as we go forward, once we get the plan in place, with the Regional Council project managing that, and there's a little bit of resource to be allocated to keep, I guess, the program ticking along and provide that sort of feedback back to the committee. We proposing the Regional Advisory Group as the key technical group as a sounding board to the work, and bringing in key stakeholders for certain actions that are under their remit. So looking at the current implementation of the Regional Public Transport Plan, it's got an extensive number of policies and actions in it that the council has put out to the public. So 52 policies and 55 actions. but many of these are interrelated. So for example, one policy might be delivered by a single action, or a single project in a transport program might deliver on several policies and actions in the plan. So I guess part of the purpose of this work was to do a line-by-line analysis of the interdependencies between the actions and the policies, and that's contained in Appendix A of the plan. Sort of a high-level summary of assessment of where we're currently sitting is that we're currently implementing about 50% of the policies and actions. We're proposing to implement a further 35% in our draft transport program, looking ahead through to the sign off of the LTP. And there is a certain number, about 15%, that we're not proposing to implement at this stage. I guess the key message from this sort of tally up is that, yeah, the vast majority are being implemented through our transport programs. And we're just going to be kind of clear on the ones that we're not implementing. In terms of things that are currently underway or proposed, there's quite a long list in the draft action plan. I've just added some examples there. For example, key pieces of work like the PT services and infrastructure business case, our rolling program of network refreshes and reviews, obviously the on-demand trial that we're just about to kick off, our school services and school service review, procurement strategy review, fare review, etc. Oops. I guess the draft action plan also recognises that our partner agencies are key to helping deliver on the RPTP. So there's quite a number of activities in other agencies' programs that help contribute to the objectives in the RPTP. And for example, things like the TSP in the Western Bay, the program delivery of that, ongoing maintenance and upgrades of PT infrastructure. There was a investigation into transport pricing that was advanced by TCC recently, and things like parking management plans in high demand areas and how they integrate with public transport. Finally, there's a smaller list of activities that we're not currently proposing for implementation at this stage. Some examples of these are things like the passenger rail business case, a regional bus services strategy, investigations into rapid transit, public transport brand review. I guess the key reasons for why we're not implementing these is that resources haven't been allocated to them in our draft LTP to deliver them. Or, for example, I guess several of them, the government direction has changed fairly dramatically in recent times since the RPTP was signed off, and we probably think it's probably not best to progress forward with these things at this stage, given the new direction from government. Finally, there's some monitoring and review provisions in the draft action plan. The monitoring approach is really to close gaps in our current key performance measures and then integrate within the Arataki quarterly monitoring report so that we have one source of truth.
Brian, just before you go on to monitoring and review, Mayor Denia had a question.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just looking at action 4.1, which is detailed on page 85, about the review of PT services and infrastructure for MDOS areas. And that says on hold pending clarification on national direction on urban housing density. Now, we have had some clarification on that, but more directly, our council has adopted MDOS and Plan Change 92, which comes into effect tomorrow. So I'm not sure that it's appropriate to not proceed with that, given that this is a live thing which is happening, as I say, from tomorrow. So is there potential to review PT services sooner rather than later for our MDRS areas?
I guess how that the policy in action was set up originally was to meet the timeframes in the National Policy Statement on Urban Development. We were sort of waiting for clarity on that document from central government. That's probably why it was, we decided to hold with it. Certainly at a more granular level in the Western Bay, if you're pushing ahead with density in certain areas, we can sort of relook at that on a case-by-case basis at a more local level without sort of waiting for the government direction and the urban development MPs.
It's become clear that although it was announced that MDRS would be optional, that's only the case if you have 30 years of land zoned. And we certainly don't, and I'm pretty sure Tauranga doesn't either. So the option is fairly illusory, and I think we need to provide transport for those areas.
Councillor Thompson, followed by Councillor Thurston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2 questions. Is that the full list of matters that aren't supposed to be implemented? And secondly, how will that be integrated with the yet to be confirmed smart growth implementation and funding plan? E.g., passenger rail strikes me as being one of the key issues, but is that a full list or are there others?
I'm just trying to find the full list in the document. I think it's almost the full list, subject to confirmation. If we go to page 64 and 65 in the agenda, that's the full list. I think I've pretty much listed them all.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there's several things acting on this list, and you'll note that the things that are in train, excuse the pun, and proposed to be not done are substantially different in size. So there's several forces acting on this. One is resources and our focus, but we remind ourselves that we did have a conversation with this group a solid 12 months ago, maybe a bit more, around the strategic direction for the RPTP and this group. We use that as a starting point for looking at this list, and subsequent LTP discussions have also informed what is a priority, particularly for Toi Moana in that respect. But certainly that's information that we use in order to help with this. And then quite clearly, latterly, the GPS has had an influence on this. It's subject to change, but there are an enormous amount of actions in that document that we have to form into an orderly queue. And I would just beg the committee's attention to the amount of things that we put on our to-do list when we move things around. Notwithstanding, things can change. It's subject to the direction of the committee.
And Mike, sorry, just the question around the integration with the smart growth funding and implementation plan. How do you propose to make sure it's all tickety-boo and lined up?
So just through you, Mr. Chair, there's several moving pieces with regard to smart growth, including the TSP program. And I think there's some work for, and latterly the TSP is looking at how it is related to the smart growth implementation program. The RLTP is a key interface into that. And of course, the RLTP is the way that we attract funding to the strategic and policy decisions that are contained in this document. So there's several SIDs that happen, I guess, with regard to this environment, and we try and keep them aligned. We also keep them live. So if things change, we change with that and we move to it. So for example, that example that was raised earlier, we will react to that situation because it is live and real here, whilst the contextual environments change. So we do intend to make sure that this list stays live with the smart growth implementation plan.
Councillor Thurston.
Chair, my question's been answered, Chairman, but with regards to Councillor O'Brien, he's got audio, but he's lost video. So he is there, but you just can't see him. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Nees.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One comment and one question. Firstly, I note that on page 65, the cost of the review of public transport service provisions to medium and high density residential areas is only $20,000. And I suggest that the live plan change that has been implemented by Western Bay will need some re-looking at the services that are coming from Mothroa. So a localised look at that. My other question is regarding where the Tauranga Public Transport, a joint public transport committee sits within this document. I don't see any mention of it in the governance section, and I just wonder if that's an omission.
Through the chair, I guess I took the lead from the legislated functions of the committee. So it does have a function to prepare for the regional council's approval a regional public transport plan. So that's kind of, I guess, the overarching directive. Certainly the Joint Public Transport Committee in the Western Bay has an important function at that more project level basis where you're talking within that context. We could probably, put that in as a key stakeholder group, but I guess it's more sort of, I guess we want to keep things regional because that's where the legislative direction is.
I do think it plays an important function, that's all, to integrate particularly the actions relating to urban intensification of public transport, and it plays a very important function in Tauranga in the Western Bay with regard to that. So I would think a small mention is probably appropriate.
I think your comments are noted, and is this, we're just receiving this report, aren't we? Oh no, we approve.
So the recommendation, Chair, is to approve the action plan. I guess one point I do want to emphasise that this is the action plan at a point in time. I guess what we're proposing is it's a live document that constantly gets updated, and then we come back to the committee at certain periods of time with updated stuff. So I'm taking on board the comments today. Certainly moving forward, we can factor those into the draft action plan. And
thank you. Commissioner Selwood and then Councillor Shirley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm struggling with the plan, to be frank, in that there doesn't seem to be a clear link between the policies and targets that we set. I can see the link to the actions, but the missing piece is the money to be able to implement the actions. And if we keep on kind of planning passenger transport or indeed transport on the basis of a constant churn of planning and action plans that don't link to the money necessary to support them, we're just kind of on a treadmill of kind of policy and planning process and not delivering much. And that's the sense that I get that we're in. It's like a treadmill that we kind of go through this process of reviewing plans. And I raised earlier the Tauranga refresh as an example. It's been 3.5 years. I understand that the cost went up and the Regional Council therefore put a pause on that, and it's now going through the LTP process, and hopefully the money will come out of that and we'll be able to implement. But I think what it clearly signals is that we need a much more rigorous approach when we start to do regional passenger transport plans or indeed regional transport plans. That is a fundability test component that is not being done. So when we did the objectives, which was targeting a 20% public transport mode share, that was based on submissions from the community. Said, we need to be much more ambitious and we need to be bold. And we kind of all accepted that because I think there's an aspiration on us all to get there. But I remember raising concerns at the time about actually, was that feasible and was it doable? And Chair, I'm sure you were in the same rank. And I think that unless we start to get honest about what is realistically achievable with the funding that we've got, and or we find new ways to fund the necessary infrastructure and service provision that we need, we're just going to keep on going round and round and round again. And I can see Bron coming to us, I won't be here, coming to you in another 6 months with another action plan saying, well, here's all of our actions, we've made progress on some, but we haven't actually delivered anything. And I suspect that that will be the tune. So my message kind of on the way out, to the extent I'll have another couple of committees, but I do think that we've got to get much more real with these plans and link them to fundability. And the next time we do one, I think that's an important imperative for the new council.
So what you're saying is we probably need a staged approach where we have our highest priority, and then while the others are in the action plan, we actually want to see progress made on the top 5, 10, whatever, rather than a list of 30 that there's no drilling into.
And you know, in the commercial world, you would probably see some sort of program Gantt chart, would have timelines, accountabilities, and more particularly funding allocations. And frankly, if it hasn't got a funding allocation, it has to go to the bottom of the list.
Happy to comment on that through you, Mr. Chair. I think we've talked about there's policy and actions and there's program to deliver, and we've promised you that Gantt chart actually. And I think part of the CIV, and particularly with bringing this here today, this is a legislative piece of work, and it is awkward and clunky in what we're trying to do with regard to what you're saying. To smooth that and to make it real, we do have to have the program to back it. So we do intend to have that in front of you. So of all the things that are on this list, what's actually going to get done and what time frame, I think is key. And why are we making progress or not making progress on things? I think that helps to be revealing those things. So we definitely intend to do that and make it more real. I think one of our, particularly in arriving here around these types of documents, it's quite difficult to use these things in order to achieve what you're doing. So we kind of have to pull it outside of this particular process. What this is useful for, though, is there's a long list of things in here, and we're choosing not to do some of that long list. And this is a 10-year document, and we can then use this as a narrowing exercise on what goes onto the program and what we actually put our effort to. So that'll be the next step of this, which is of these things on this particular list, how are they going? What's got the money? And to be direct, these things are in our LTP, and once the LTP is confirmed in whatever scale and whatever detail that gets changed as part of that, that gives us our mandate to move forward on that. And that's when that program will become very real, because everything on that program will be funded, and we'll be able to say that we actually have the money to do that or not. And there's some things that won't be on there because they won't be funded, and that'll become a real conversation for this committee to think about and talk about.
Look, I think that process and rigour is really important. I'm pleased to hear that the program work will come through, but I'd be surprised if regional council can actually afford the level of investment that would be necessary to deliver 20% mode share within 10 years. It'd be great if you could, but I suspect you can't. And so, you know, it comes back to setting the original target in the first place, and what is realistic, because otherwise we're just kind of kidding ourselves that we've got this aspiration, but we haven't got a hope and heck of delivery. Thank you, Mike.
Councillor Shirley.
Thank you, Chair. You know, I had a similar thought process to Commissioner Selwood. Actually, it's been concerning me for some time, and that a regional transport plan is an important communication of achievable outcomes in the short to medium term within the framework of a longer term outlook, and it is just matching that outcome funding priorities, and you can very easily get trapped into this sort of cycle of perpetual planning, and process becomes the product. You know, you see it too often, whereas outcomes should be the product. So I certainly endorse the comments made by Commissioner Program, and quite frankly, I think the passenger rail and rapid transit were, in my view, always way pie in the sky stuff in terms of what's achievable in the medium to long term. So I'm happy to see that they're no longer featuring in the stuff that is proceeding. But on that point, when we look at the list on page 65, the last bullet point there, these are the programs that won't be proceeding with the funding, but Maori responsiveness framework for public transport. I'd just like someone to explain to me conceptually, what does that mean?
I think from the original regional public transport plan, it was how do we factor Maori values and cultural associations back into our public transport system a bit better. So whether that's reflecting, you know, geographical links to places in our routes, or design, public transport design, so forth.
Thank you. For me, as well as funding constraints, it's deliverability certainty that we have to. It's no good with your plans if we can't actually physically deliver the service that we're proposing. In other words, 1 is funding, 2 is manpower, 3 is availability of contractors. These things have to be realistic, and I think we've seen that in the regional land transport plan. There was a very big wish list there that funding was always going to be an issue, but also would NZTA, for instance, be able to have the staff, the contractors available to actually complete the work within the timeframes of what was required. And it's the same with public transport. So when you do your Gantt chart, I think you need to take into account ability to deliver. So, because what I want to see is when we get there, is if we look in 12 months' time, and in 2 years' time, and in 3 years' time, each year we can mark off some absolute gains of improvement that we can actually measure and see. And so we've got to be real. I totally concur with Commissioner Selwood. We took the 20% mode shift as aspirational based on the community feedback, but and I think, you know, in the list there was, because there was a demand from the community for commuter rail, we allowed it to be in the thing, whereas we all know that when we're constrained in some ways, some things aren't while they might be in the 30-year plan, within the 3 to 10 years, they're unlikely. And I think we need more realistic expectations because if we try to achieve too much in our initial, we'll achieve nothing. So we're better to have, instead of 100, have 5 things that we are going to achieve in the next 12 months and work and tick those off, and then we move on to the next 5 and then tick them off and move on. That would be my view. Anybody else got any comments before we move on to the monitoring part? Back to you, Bron.
Sorry, I thought we'd finished. So the presentation's gone. Just finishing off the monitoring and review section. So really the purpose of the monitoring approach was to close gaps in our current key performance measures and to integrate those within our quarterly Arataki monitoring report. So reduce a bit of duplication or time and costs, so forth. And looking at review provisions, what we're proposing is a move to a 6-yearly full review of the RPTP. That would be timed with RLTP development and consultation, with some more streamlined mid-term technical reviews in the sort of 3-yearly period in between. I guess the key purpose of this stuff is to reduce that time and costs, reduce duplication, and hopefully get a more integrated consultation proposal out to the public so that we're consulting on our RPTP and our RLTP at the same time. And hopefully that allows us to line up all our resources, our priorities, and so forth in one sort of integrated approach rather than sort of this piecemeal approach that's slightly out of sync, I guess.
Thank you, Bron, for that. The recommendations are on page 46 of your agenda. The first, that we received the report for the draft plan and approve, the two that we approve the draft plan, noting that as part of that, that staff have noted the need to review it and ensure that it is
Suggest that staff bring forward the program to the committee, which is the implementation.
Yeah, I think so. I think staff have noted it anyway, and they will do that. So do we need it added in? It doesn't hurt if you can get it there. All right. So there's, I'll move that bit out. There's the word, the new wording: approves the Bay of Plenty Regional Public Transport Plan, Action Plan, and directs staff to bring to the committee implementation program. The implementation program. All right, I'm happy to move that. Do we have a seconder? Seconder by.
Order. Can I just maybe suggest that as well as what you've got there, approves the Bay of Plenty Regional Public Transport Plan, Action Plan, noting it is a living document, or words to that effect, because things have changed as I pointed out, and then the rest of it I'm happy with.
I'm happy with it. You happy with it? Yep. Living. All right. You happy with that? Yep, other way around, but doesn't matter. That's okay. Okay, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. We're going to move now to 9.5. Is Councillor Thompson still there? She wanted to be before she left. The Community Connect decision paper. Can you
lead out?
Just lead that and just recognise that we can't make a resolution in this committee. We have to recommend it to our council because it's a question of funding.
Yes, apologies. The recommendation isn't clear enough that we need to go to regional council as per the original decision around fares and fare structure that sits with the full council. And we've adjusted those recommendations to note that we did have this paper on the full council agenda as a draft item, so you will be seeing it there. So as a matter of process, our full council will get to consider this and discuss the matter in that forum. However, one of the elements here is that particularly with the deadline around the central government direction around the change, bringing it to the PTC is a very useful exercise for staff, in that we get to test the questions that we may to get directed to, and also prepare a paper that is able to answer those questions. I did personally feel last time that when we took this paper to full council, some of the questions that were asked were good and great questions, and I would have liked to have done a bit more work on them before I tried to answer them. So this is a really good test run for us, and also just to test the will of the group around this particular proposal. So I'm happy to leave it to you, Jamie, to take us forward from there, and we'll try and answer your questions as we go.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, members here in the room and those online. I'm here to discuss the Community Connect changes and seek endorsement to take a preferred response to full council for approval. Since the central government announcement in December 2023, this is a conversation that's echoing through the councils of New Zealand. How did we get here? In May 2023, the central government at the time extended the Community Connect funding package to include free public transport for children under 13 and half-price fares for people under 25. In June 2023, council directed staff to align with the government announcement with effect from the 1st of July 2023. New government announced in December 2023 that funding for this extension would end on the 30th of April 2024. One thing to please note, there is no change to community service cards or total mobility portions of the Community Connect funding package. The level of funding we receive for this portion is $1.9 million annually. Today, I'm here to ask that the PTC receives the report, Community Connect's decision paper, endorses staff to seek approval from full council to implement the change by 1st of May 2024 as outlined in the report, and endorses option 2 in line with the draft, which is in line with the draft GPS, is to revert to the pre-Community Connect extension fares as the preferred option. As we step through, we looked at 3 scenarios for this. The status quo, as we currently stand with the funding. Option 1, with 19 to 24-year-olds reverting to paying the full adult fare, and then 6 to 18-year-olds, option 2, 6 to 18-year-olds will have to pay more for off-peak travel than they do currently, and 19 to 24-year-olds will revert to paying the full adult fare. These 3 options we ran through the process. If you look on page 6, there's a table with the breakout of the costs for the 3 options and how they will affect us and how they will affect targeted rates. Coming here today, due to the timeline that Mike's already touched on being quite tight, May the 1st is the velocity of that work is coming quite quickly towards us, and we all have operational needs to support. We're also part of the consortium for RITS, so all of the councils will be making all of the changes all at the same time, and if they vary, then that's going to be a complex time. There is communication going out to the wider, to the nation from both Ministry of Transport and Waka Kotahi. It's been well signalled in advance. So if we go to page 6 table, we have a look. We have the 3 different options, status quo, option 1 and option 2. And at the bottom, you can see how it affects us. We are recommending option 2, which is reverting to pre-Community Connect extension that came live on the 1st of July 2023.
Just to be clear, when he says page 6, I think you're referring to page 120 in our agenda.
Oh, apologies. Sorry, page 6 of the paper. 116. Thank you.
No. It's this table, wasn't it?
So the tables that are relevant to the conversation are on 117, the current versus preferred option.
120, you're right.
And then 118 and 119, they do drift across the pages. Sorry for the formatting, it makes it harder to read. And then, of course, the financial implications in the options selection in and around 120. Just a little bit of context. The paper is being put forward as a result of the preparation of our LTP as Toi Moana has made there was an assumption in it that the funding as it was true at the time would continue through to at minimum at the end of this financial year. And potentially carried through. So not anticipating the change of government and also having to sort of make a call at the time, we have not budgeted for the level of subsidy that currently Waka Kotahi pays for as part of this proposal. So we brought you this paper as a status quo or a position that aligns us with what we've said in our LTP. Understandably that there is some principles to debate here and some decisions to be made, but as far as staff are concerned, this is the option that allows us to remain consistent with what we've published in the LTP. And I think from our perspective, that was the more cautious approach and noting that council has the full decision at the full council meeting. So a little bit of the history around why we got here, how we got here, and then the paper itself, our staff are recommending that we revert back to that position we were at pre the June decision paper that went to full council in its simplest form.
Councillor Nees.
Thank you. So just to confirm, the position that's in the LTP is the cost to council, not the cost to the user, is changed. So what you're saying is you're saying that because we're going to lose the funds from Waka Kotahi, we have to change the fare structure to stay within the current financial envelope. But we haven't consulted with the public that we're proposing to change the fare structure from what we said in the LTP was going to be the same.
In short, yes. There's two conversations in that statement. Is the expectation from our communities around what they see as the fares, and we haven't talked about those fares changing. I think it's fair to say that our LTP is relatively silent on that level of detail with regard to fares, but you could say that there's an inherent assumption. In terms of the financials, the situation for Toi Moana, and particularly with its free fares policy pre the government announcement June last year, we had a more favourable fares policy towards customers already, and council had made the decision at the time to subsidise those free fares. The announcement actually realised sort of a source of funding for Toi Moana to offset its costs already. So in terms of the LTP, that's the setting within the LTP that there's an assumption that Waka Kotahi funding was available. And if council makes a decision around continuing on with the policy as it is now, it means that we will have to replace that money with council funds. So there'll be more cost to this council in order to keep things the same. So this paper really is a reversal to that original position.
So the point that I want to make that we made, we did consult in our last LTP, and the decision that we made then was free fares at all times for children. You haven't mentioned that in your paper. You mentioned that you're proposing to go back to the pre-Community Connect fare structure. Now that was brought in partway through the LTP period because of bad behaviour on the buses, and that came out as a bit of an ad hoc paper, and we made a decision to only revert back to free fares only at peak. I was against that then. I'm still against that now. So I'm signalling that I prefer option one, but I also don't agree with us making this decision at this time when we have not done any consultation to the public with the public on what this might mean to them. And it also doesn't align with our fare review, which is due to be happening later on the year. And philosophically, I have difficulty when we have a policy and action that says that we are going to make fare changes as part of the LTP, that we are making such a change without talking to our public. Thank you.
Can I say, Councillor Nees, that this has been brought about by government legislation, both bringing it in and taking it away. And so that's the issue. So it's not a matter of we haven't consulted out the public. We didn't get consulted on before the government changed it in June last year, and we haven't got time to be consulted on it before this government's change. What it will affect, and we will have to have a rigorous debate at our full council, because it has big implications for actually funding viability for our public transport budget, full stop, if we don't do something. So it's, as I say, it's not for us to make a decision today, but we can make a recommendation to our council. Mayor Denyer.
Yeah, I want to support Jane, Councillor Nees in this one. I'd noted that I think option one has merit. It keeps things simple. It encourages children to use public transport, and as far as I can tell, the off-peak use by children would be relatively small, given that they're usually in school and so on. So I realise I'm not apparently the decision maker on this one, but I think option one is where I would be leaning towards.
Councillor Shirley.
Thank you, Chair. My recall is that the Community Connect extension, the decision the council took last June, was essentially extending a trial. It had only been implemented as a trial. It's a public record that it was a split vote. I personally strongly, and it was against the recommendation of the staff at the time. I think on reflection, it was clearly a bad and wrong decision. So I strongly endorse the recommended option 2.
Thank you. I see Councillor McMillan's got her hand up, but this is going to go to full council, Councillor McMillan, so you'll get your opportunity to talk there. Thank you. Any more further discussion? Councillor Thompson.
I totally support Councillor Nees and Mayor Denyer, their position on this. Looking forward to a wholesome debate at full council. My question, Michael, to you is, given the better than expected patronage, what's the Tauranga Reserve looking like in terms of forecasting?
In terms of, I'm assuming this is a dollars question, with regard to this change, we had not budgeted to fund that Waka Kotahi component. I think there was some risk in that assumption, and so we haven't allowed for it. So for us, reverting back meant that we have a financially almost a nil effect on our finances, but I'm not comfortable giving you the direct numbers right now, because I'll just need to work those out. But there is an impact, a financial impact on council to not do option 2. And I think that's the kind of thing we will reveal with a bit more detail in particularly the regional council meeting, impact on reserves and whatnot.
Okay, so my position is I totally support Councillor Nees' position and Mayor Denyer. Thank you.
Councillor Thurston. You're on silent.
That's a blessing for you, Chairman. Just to say, I fully support Mayor Denyer and Councillor Nees, and I'll be looking forward to a more detailed debate at a full council. But sadly, it's an end to the Community Connect initiative. We know it's a political initiative. unlike the Honourable Ken Shirley, I never really saw it as a trial, and I firmly believe that the initiatives that we supported and backed were a major contributor to boosting patronages we've had highlighted today. So I see it as a positive initiative, and I look forward to the debate. But I fully commend His Worship and Councillor Nees for their leadership in this matter.
All right, so we have a resolution, no, it's not what is it, a recommendation? Can you put it up?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just, I think there's a bit of a point of clarification, just to make sure. So with regard to the deadline is the deadline. We no longer receive that revenue at that point, on the 1st of May. And so we will endeavour to get this decision in front of full council as quickly as possible so the debate can happen. There is a financial impact to that, particularly if we maintain the status quo. So the recommendation in the paper was to help protect that situation, and that would lessen that financial impact significantly. It's just if that point wasn't clear in the paper, that's the point that staff are trying to make with you now, is that that's the decision on the 1st. So whatever the decision is, that's the, I guess, the worst case scenario.
So I'm happy to move the recommendation as outlined on the screen. Do we have a seconder?
Point of order. Would it, given what the decision making is, as has been outlined, are we recommending to regional council rather than approving? So recommendation 2 approves option 2. Are we approving or recommending?
We're recommending. No, we're recommending. We can only recommend to council. So we. I think.
Supports or endorses.
Yep, and I've got a second of, are you happy with that seconder, Mr. Chairman? So it's moved and seconded. Any discussion on those? I'll put the resolution. It's resolved. All in favour, please say aye. Against?
No. No.
So we've got 4 no's that I can record. And how many, can the ayes put their hands up, please? 5. So Councillor O'Brien, can you speak to us and tell us where you stand? He doesn't have audio.
Chairman, just a point of clarification, isn't Her Worship voting on behalf of RLC and not the alternate?
No, she's the alternate, according to the thing, and O'Brien is the lead if he's there. If he's not there.
Councillor O'Brien isn't there, then it's Tanya's up.
Yeah, he is there, but
In the
But he
absence
doesn't
of-
have-
in the absence of Councillor O'Brien, I'd support those who had voted no against this. I appreciate their reasoning for it, but I also appreciate that the chairman may have a casting vote in this for it to go to council for final decision. So I will be voting against on behalf of Brooksville Lakes Council.
so that puts 5-5, and I do have a casting vote as chair. So I'm going to put it up as that to council, recognising that it is only a recommendation. It's not so the full council will get to make the decision. It will be robustly, but at least it will be on the table for full council.
Chairman, can I call for a division, please?
You can.
Thank you.
So
We can start with the.
okay, so voting for with a clear name, as if we go around the room, please. Campbell. Shirley. Selwood. Dennis. Edwin. Von Dardelson. And votes against in the room. Just in the room.
Denya.
Denya. Not in the room.
Nees.
Thompson,
Please. Thompson. Tapsell.
Thurston.
Thurston. Yeah.
Chairman,
So
Chairman, just a point of clarification with the Waka Kotahi reps, they are, I beg your pardon, they're non-voting. Beg your pardon, I withdraw
they're
that.
non-voting. Yeah.
Yep, sorry.
So I will use my casting vote to put it on the council agenda. So either way, it will be a full council decision. All right, we move on to 9.3. The tertiary commuter services.
Morena tātou, councillors. The paper I have presented is in respect to the Bay of Plenty Regional Tertiary commuter services that have been operating since 2020. These to now have provided a free and direct service for our tertiary students to travel into key locations for the purpose of accessing tertiary service. They have also been accessed through other members of the public, and as such provide a connector or a link for members of the public from areas like Whakatane to Tauranga, Rotorua to Tauranga, Katikati to Tauranga, Murupara to Rotorua, and Tauranga to Rotorua. This effectively is an access service, which quoted in the RPTP plan generally focuses on social objectives such as providing communities with a basic level of access to essential goods and services, health, education and social support. And further, communities have access to a resilient and reliable transport system that provides them with a range of travel choices to meet their social, economic, health and cultural needs. And the last part of that plan in respect to education services. Bay of Plenty Regional Council recognises that there are significant social benefits to allowing residents to pursue further education and that transport is sometimes an impediment to this. In response, we will partner with education providers to provide services that meet the needs of students where education providers are willing to share a part of these costs. As a result, a funding model was explored and created in partnership with two tertiary institutions, Toi Ohomai, which are based in Tauranga, and University of Waikato, that of course have a campus in Durham Street in Tauranga. We explored the patronage of these services, and if you go to page 102, I think it is in the agenda, you can see the patronage per route from route 101 to route 105, and the breakdown of tertiary students versus other, which are just normal members of the public travelling for the purpose of getting from A to B. And then we looked at the utilisation on those buses, which is the amount of how much the bus is full, really. And you can see that the utilisation, I think the highest amount recorded there is 18%. That was Whakatane to Tauranga in 2023, and the lowest in 2021 was Murupara to Rotorua. And if you do some basic maths by way of a breakdown on some of those smaller amounts, that would have probably amount to single digit numbers on some of those trips. We looked at the expenditure or cost per person to run these services, And this is reflected on Appendix 1 at the on the last page. And you can see under the co-funding model, the Bay of Plenty share, if you start at the top, the Route 101 as an example, the Bay of Plenty share, University of Waikato, Toi Ohomai, and then the net cost per person, what it actually costs. And of course, our students enjoy a free service. So the tertiary commuters provided an important social connector with the communities, which we are well aware of. It's proposed that so Waikato University have made an approach to regional council, so we didn't initiate this, and they have indicated that what they wanted was to see students starting to contribute towards their fare, which is the case in Hamilton. When students travel to Waikato University, they enjoy a 50% subsidised model at the moment. I understand that will be reduced to a 30% subsidised model. Toi Ohomai weren't asking for students to pay, but they did comment that like other organisations, the screws are on them with their spending, and they think it's a good idea. So they've left on that idea as well. We can suggest that if we were to go to a fares model for our students, then it would be in line with what our tertiary students pay in town on the urban network, which is 60% of an adult fare at present, which would provide consistency with our present fares structure. The increase in fare recovery, fare box recovery, has a subsequent effect on what is left to be paid between regional council and the two tertiary institutions, and to that effect some analysis was done and ascertained that this is under 7.2. If we were to look at the patronage for 2023 and adopt a 60% adult fare to those students for the last calendar year, then at the bottom of the page you can see that the amounts that would be saved, regional council would have saved $12,900, and the other two $4,100 and $8,747 over the course of the whole year. So potentially, although we are seeing an increase in patronage on these services, which is great news, the gains, I guess the reduced costs aren't that big in the big scheme of things. So this is submitted for council to consider and make a decision respectfully in respect to the the retention of the tertiary and commuter services. And we recommend a communications campaign that would be aimed at increasing patronage if that was the case. And also that you would approve the tertiary student fare to be increased to 6% of the adult fare to align with the urban service for these services, subject to review during the regular fares policy review, which you'll be aware of will occur later on in the year. As far as possible implementation goes, we have agreed with tertiary providers. We've extended our contract to the end of June this year, but we would be loath to potentially cease the service in the middle of the year. We would need to at least run to the end of the year if the view was that it would cease. But if it was to, if we were to implement fares, then the recommendation would be that would be at the commencement of 2025, which is the commencement of the new school tertiary year, plus provides time for communication with students, mindful that this could be an extra $30 or $40 a week that they have to find each out of their meagre earnings.
Questions? Mayor Denia?
Can I just clarify, are these additional extra buses that have been laid on, or is it more of a supporting function?
So they are additional buses that are put on. So you'll see that 103 is Katikati to Tauranga, but that is aside from the normal Katikati to Tauranga buses that travel into town.
So how does that integrate? I mean, conceptually, wouldn't it make more sense just to run more buses and don't call one of them a tertiary school bus or something?
We've looked at a possible rationalisation process to see across these 5 services where that could occur, and it's difficult to rationalise potentially one trip. The ones that travel from, I understand that the ones that travel from Katikati to Tauranga also serve to provide, they fill a gap or provide relief for when a driver has a break. It's all part of what's planned with that. And of course, if we were to remove the, I guess, the fundamental model of this free and direct service, then the normal Katikati to Tauranga bus would just stop at the interchange, and then the students would then have to find another bus, for instance, to get themselves to Toi Ohomai, if this was where they're heading.
So there's a slight tweak in the destination, and they're both Katikati to Tauranga, but Tauranga means outside University of Waikato, not the other bus stop somewhere else. Yeah,
that's right.
Okay, thank you.
What else?
Chairman, I don't know if you can see that you're in. Councillor O'Brien wants to ask a question.
We can't see that, or I can't.
No, he's got his hand up on our screens. Are you on audio, Councillor O'Brien?
I hope so, Councillor First. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could I just make a comment, please? So some time ago when we first came onto this committee, I actually took the Rotorua to Tauranga service. And the actual service, we stop about halfway, and then another bus, I presume carrying students from Tauranga to Rotorua, we had to wait about 10 to 15 minutes for them to meet us at a spot off the road. We then jumped onto each other's buses, swapped over, and then continued on the way. And I just have a concern that perhaps some of the issue around the low patronage would be, as I say, we were about 10, 15 minutes. I could have been in Tauranga a good sort of 20 minutes earlier than having taken this route. Now, it's a great route, and I'd suggest, there's an opportunity to increase patronage, especially early hours. But that did seem to me to be a rather strange way, rather than just 2 buses going past each other. Somewhat more efficient, but I'll just leave that there. But it did seem, forgive me, it did seem a bit of an inefficient way. And as I say, it was about another 20 minutes onto my trip. Thank you.
Happy to just take that on board, Councillor O'Brien. I think we are in the vicinity of shoestring services here, and I think in the paper we've outlined that these services represent options to help us fulfil some of our policy and strategic commitments to transport disadvantage and accessible communities and so on and so forth. So just in an overall sense, we do spend the minimum we can, and we get a minimum viable product, and I think it's representative in here. One of the things that we're pleased about is the increase in tertiary students using them. Whilst a big percentage, it's still not a big number. And if you look at the overall service as a whole, it represents about 1.6% of our total expenditure. So if we were thinking about this as a portfolio, this is a very small part of your portfolio with regard to public transport. And that's lent itself towards the staff recommendation around retention of these services. But what we'd like to do is that there's an opportunity in the underutilisation of those existing buses to be taken advantage of, and some investment there is what one of our recommendations is. If we choose to keep them, how can we fill those seats up? And with whom? And so I think there's some work that we profit there in terms of being able to do that. With regard to making it more efficient and user-friendly, we'll definitely have a look at those things as we go through. But I guess the proviso is we're going to try and keep it as smell of the oily rag as possible, because the cost per passenger still is quite high comparatively.
Councillor Nees.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm taking on board the approaches that we've had from the tertiary providers, and I want to acknowledge that. However, I am still concerned that we are. This is a similar situation to what we've had with the community collect, but it's been dealt with in a different way. It's recommending that the fare change doesn't occur until the beginning of the next financial year, and it also highlights that it's going to be reviewed again with the fare review later on in the year. So that those 2 points I will definitely be taking up with council when we debate it, because I presume this one is going through as a recommendation to council to consider as well, because this committee has no mandate to make changes like this.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the genesis of this this commitment came out of our Toi Moana's LTP workshops around understanding the potential cost savings in the tertiary services space. We again thought it was very appropriate for us to bring it to the PTC in this respect, and considering that what we're recommending is very much keep it and retain what we have with some improvement. We thought that was the sort of right space to be. You're exactly right, though. It is if there's an impact on full council and budgets, it would go to full council for the final decision, and we definitely have that process in place. But again, testing the waters in the PTC committee is absolutely relevant for what we're trying to do here, and point taken.
Commissioner Selwood.
Yeah, I'm supportive of the recommendations and happy to move it. I think, and my position on this, and I appreciate it's a recommendation through the regional council anyway, who will make the final decision, but the reality is we're all constrained with funding. The patronage is quite low. I agree with the staff recommendation that an increase in fees is unlikely to have a significant, if any, impact on the existing patronage. If we can raise some funding that can get that patronage up, every extra passenger costs us nothing effectively, because we're already subsidising it. So I think getting the patronage up is the priority here. I'd like to see the funding as recommended go into that. Then we can take the opportunity to review the situation in perhaps 12 months and see what impact there has been. So I'll move the motion, Chair.
So the motion as it's in the paper has to be a change to be a recommendation to council, just like the one before. I'm happy to second it on the basis that this 60% is at the behest of our tertiary providers. That's what their desirable action is, and what we don't want to do is risk losing this service altogether if they don't come through with, if we make it unattractive for them to continue it, we risk the service in total, and that's the last thing we want to do. So just recognising that, I'm happy to second it as a recommendation to council. Councillor Thurston.
Sorry, in terms of part, can we I note that you're changing it from approves to recommendations, but can you weave in there the statement that the rollout is from 2025 as part of that part 3?
Are you happy with that, Mr. Mover? So give the wording. What's your wording?
Well, just make it very clear that the rollout of this potential fare increase is from 2025.
Thank you. We're just doing the wording. We'll get back, I'll get it on the screen in a second. You happy with that? I'm happy with that. We'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? One's against that. Do you want your vote recorded?
Yes, please. It's the inconsistency of the recommendations to the previous one that I'm very concerned about.
Did you vote against?
Yes, I did.
Councillor Nees, so it's 2 against. And you want yours recorded?
Can you add me to that too, Chairman, please?
Anyone else?
You may need your cast to, but
Carried. We move on to we move to 9.4 special events. It's you, Bron.
It's me, Chair. Okay, so this particular report recommends some decision-making criteria on when the regional council provide public transport support for special events. This is a follow-up to a previous report to the committee on the provision of free fares from the March meeting last year. It also completes an action in the regional public transport plan. So the main body of the report discusses some potential decision-making criteria. The starting point being the wording in policy 211 of the operative RPTP, which provides some broad direction on when council would support special events. So I guess this report drills down into that policy a little more and sets some more specific criteria to help make decisions around council support. So several criteria subsequently recommended following on from the discussion. These are centred on limiting council support to existing scheduled public transport services. And then the events demonstrating that they have clear community benefits, that they are free and open to the public generally. They are run on a not-for-profit basis, and organisers are prepared to pay the full cost of any additional services that they request from the regional council. If a request fulfills all those criteria, council will then determine the level of support it will provide, whether that is in terms of free or subsidised fares, marketing opportunities, etc. And you'll see in the report that the decision-making criteria have been included in a decision diagram to assist those making decisions on proposals. The report also recommends that the criteria are subsequently tested on new requests as they are received, and then refined and brought back to the committee as necessary. So the recommendation is that the committee approves the criteria as set out in the report.
Open for discussion.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to add a little bit of operational context. We found ourselves in some awkward positions recently as staff, having to make very quick decisions around support for community events without council visibility or guidance on the level of support we should take. So this is a response to that. We brought that in March around our concerns, and this is our response to that. So we'd appreciate that. What we'd like to do, and what we're trying to set up here, is the ability to make operational decisions with council sort of guidance firmly in place, so that we can respond to those requests in a quicker manner than we have been. And noting Mayor Tapsell, I think I owe you an apology, I haven't got back to you, and I do apologise for that. Part of the difficulty is for us to make those decisions quickly, but it is absolutely my apologies for that.
Councillor Thurston.
yeah, I know we have to have a policy for everything, and picking up on the officer's comments, I don't have a lot of sympathy for organisations who put pressure on the organisation for a quick decision, because they would have known way back in the early stages of their planning that they were going to have to move crowds to venues and that they would possibly need to look at some form of public transport, be it subsidised or free or whatever. But my personal view is I feel we're overcomplicating all of this. To me, there's not a lot of them, and I think they should be dealt with politically on a case-by-case basis. But no doubt I'll be out of step with everyone on that one, so I'm not winning much today.
Mayor Tapsell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Look, thank you for the apology, although not necessarily needed. We appreciate that staff are often under time pressures yourself, and we also appreciate that at the time we had requested, we then went into the Christmas break, which is the longest and only break that people get as councillors. However, I do think that it's worthwhile finding better processes for this. The most recent example we had was our Lakeside concert here in Rushuru. We can get up to 20,000 people visiting this. We often have people from around the region coming to this free concert held here on our village green at Rushuru. In the past, we've had free public transport provided. I'm not sure of the details of how that was organised at the time. However, I must say it is certainly appreciated by the community and those who attend, because as we all know, with any major event, once you start reaching those numbers, public transport is key. However, we do not have that available in the hours and the timeframes based on the usual schedules. So I think it is worthwhile supporting staff to be able to make minor operational decisions, especially if there may be some funding support to provide that service too. So we could certainly work better collaboratively to get a better result for the communities that we serve, make sure that they can get to the places they need to be.
Thank you. Councillor Nees.
Thank you. I do support having decision-making criteria, and I found the flowchart quite helpful. However, where it lacks, I think, is the size of the event. You know, how many people are going to be wanting to be transported on public transport. I didn't see that anywhere. And I'd also be interested in seeing a few real live examples, because I was asking myself, for example, a rugby final, a regional rugby final or a regional kapahaka competition, are they not for profit, or are they are the organisers trying to cover costs, for example? So I would be interested in seeing a couple of work examples using the flowchart to ensure that it's not going to cause any problems. But in principle, I favour the approach.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak to this? Do I have a mover and seconder? Move Commissioner Selwood, seconded Mayor Denia. Put it to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. We then move to this is an information only report on total mobility. And you'll be happy to know that we're now only 2 minutes behind my run sheet time. So we've done well.
So, good afternoon, councillors, to those of you who are here and online. I appreciate that we're last in a very long morning and that lunch has just arrived, so we won't keep you very long. I just wanted to go through very quickly some of the total mobility survey results for us. We have just completed our first survey, so for us that's a really big thing for our team to actually have some data that we can talk to and look at. So if we can just, what we've got. So from this set of data, we can see that weekly medical trips are the most common, and shopping is the next, use of TM with social as the third. Approximately 34% of our TM clients also have the accessibility concession, which is great, which means that they've got two opportunities. 55% only have a TM card and 11% just have the accessible concession. And of our clients, 18% of them need a hoist vehicle. So if we go to question 6, we only received 113 responses on that one. However, 76% of the people that did respond said that they had no issue with getting a hoist vehicle. However, the remaining 24% said that hoist vehicles were sometimes available and sometimes not. So that's something that we need to look at. We do feel that perhaps with better client education about pre-booking hoist vehicles, that could help, but we do want to look at, when we redo our contracts this year, at encouraging some of these smaller operators to invest in hoist vehicles. And just as a point, we have 932 hoist users from our current client base of 4,624. And I wanted to go through this wee word cloud with you. Obviously, we've put in, it's a warts and all answer. There are a few comments in there that don't obviously apply to total mobility, a bit of crossover because the survey covered accessible concession as well. So things like bus routes unsuitable, etc., those comments we'll pass on to our operations team. And in question 9, for the information. So we currently have a community education program, which we've spoken to you about before, but we can still see that there is a need for us to get that further into the community so that those people who are able to are able to join and find information about the scheme. We currently are doing our last couple of presentations at the moment in our community education program, simply because we are understaffed at the moment. So on question 11, 62% of our clients are getting taxis within 10 minutes, which we think is really good. And obviously, we think that some of the answers where we're not getting them, where we can see the respondent information, we do believe that that's about pre-booking. And if people need hoist vehicles, again, it's that education for our clients about pre-booking a hoist vehicle because we don't have enough. Question 12, again, just another word cloud with quite a few things in there. We do get lots and lots of positives that we hear from our team, our clients regularly. However, from that, we see that there's 10% or just under 10% who feel the scheme is not supporting their needs. So again, we'll be turning our attention to education for drivers and operators, as well as our call centre staff and clients. So we will be sharing the results of this survey with our operators. Where we've had direct respondents that they've given us their name, we'll be talking to them about any issues that they have so that we can deal with those. Question 13, again, there's a couple of accessible transport answers there in our word cloud, crossings, footrests, cars who use mobility spots and traffic congestion. But it just shows again that there's a bit more education that we need to do across the board with the sentiments that are reflecting changes required. And question 14, for us, is a really good one. An average score of 4.39 out of 5 for the total mobility experience is a huge win for our team. We know that we play a really important part in the lives of these transport disadvantaged people, and we genuinely love doing what we do. So a lot of these survey answers came back in paper form and we had to input them. So you can imagine there were some entertaining comments and we had a few chuckles, and we also had a few teary eyes while reading some of those comments. One in particular stuck with me, and it was from a woman completing the form for her late father. And she said, "I'm filling out this form for my father who passed away a few days ago. I want to thank you so much for this wonderful service. It helped my father complete his end-of-life journey in a safe and dignified manner. Thank you once again." And there's a slide at the very end that will just pop up when we're finished, which has got a whole lot of the positive comments about total mobility. So you were wanting to see the benefits as well as the costs, which we provided in the paper. So they're there. The next few slides, I'd like to introduce Gemma Wilshire, who was our summer student this year. She produced these dashboards and analysing the survey results as her project with us. We're thrilled with what she's achieved for us. As I said, we haven't been able to get this sort of information before. Gemma's got away with figures, dashboards and spreadsheets, and I often say she hasn't met a spreadsheet she doesn't love. Gemma's currently at Waikato University, and we hope that she's fine-tuning her skills to come back and work with us. Gemma.
All right, so looking at the slide here, we completed a sentiment analysis of 185 comments in the district of Rotorua. Firstly, we wanted to see what our clients liked most about our scheme. This is where the top 5 comments come in. Overall, our clients in Rotorua had a very positive response to our survey, value the scheme because it is the only reason they're able to maintain independence in their day-to-day lives. One comment here states that total mobility has been a big help during their fight with bowel cancer, which I think shows that we are helping the sickest in our community just get out and about and help themselves. Looking at the graphs at the bottom, each individual comment was assessed and given an overall sentiment score, 1 being a very negative response and 5 being a very positive response. An average score is shown below. We have collated the overall score for each question and derived an average. An interesting point to note is that the anything else question is not posed as a lead to for the surveyors to respond in a positive or negative way. Therefore, I find it holds the most value when our clients share their clear feelings towards the scheme. For this section, we scored a 3.88, leading towards an overall positive result. When clients were asked what they liked about the scheme, a positive average score of 4.07 was found. As expected, when clients asked if they had any problems with the scheme, there was an overall negative response. When clients were asked if they would like any changes with the scheme, we scored a 3.08, being a neutral response and indicating that clients are satisfied with the service. After we gathered the sentiment scores for each question, we delved further and investigated each overall sentiment response per age group. Overall, in Rotorua, there is no category that averages below a neutral response. This graph shows a positive trend where the higher the age group, the more positive response to the service. Our 85 plus group, which makes up the majority of our client base, has an overall positive response in their comments throughout the survey. This is the same analysis that was completed for the area of Tauranga, which totaled 472 comments to analyse. Looking at the top 5 comments for the area of Tauranga, the consensus is that the total mobility provides our clients with independence that they would not otherwise have. Once again, the sentiment score of anything else resulted in a positive response of 4.05 out of 5. This is a fantastic response that indicates that without a directed question, surveyors had positive feelings towards the scheme. The same general trend that we found in Rotorua can be found here in Tauranga, where questions with positive connotations yield positive results and so forth. This same trend has been seen throughout all 4 studied locations. Deviating from Rotorua, Tauranga age trend shows quite a horizontal response, sitting around the 3.5 mark between neutral and positive, which overall shows a consistency of our service. The Western Bay area had a total of 72 comments for their area. Our top comments indicate the clients within the Western Bay value our scheme because they feel supported. It makes their lives easier and improves their mental health. Looking to the age sentiment graph, there is a negative response for the age 0 to 25. This response can be attributed to a small number of surveyors in this category, where a single negative response can skew the results quite significantly. For the other 5 age groups, the Western Bay follows the same pattern as Tauranga and fluctuates between 3.2 and 3.8, which indicates that there are satisfied to positive sentiment towards the service we provide. The Whakatane district had a total of 31 comments to analyse. In all the listed comments, there has been a positive mention towards our transport operator, Whakatane Dial-a-Cab. These comments indicate that this service has a fantastic delivery service and allows clients who suffer from serious disabilities to visit their families. As 31 comments is a small number, it has led to quite drastic fluctuations in sentiment for our age graph. Within the Whakatane district, we gathered no written comments from people within the ages of 0 to 25 and 66 to 75. This slide here shows the overall sentiment gathered for each district. As you can see, Western Bay scored the highest overall sentiment at 3.57 out of 5. This places them squarely between the neutral and positive sentiment in the comments. Both Rotorua and Tauranga were not far behind. The number of positive responses outweighed the negative ones. Looking to the total frequency of use graph, this graph shows the frequency that our clients use the service. As you can see, 40.7% of our clients use this service weekly, 22% use it rarely, 20% use the service monthly, and 14.5% daily. Finally, the word map that you see above shows the frequency of words used in our survey responses. The larger the word, the higher the frequency. Words thank you were most present in our survey. Other words such as independent, friendly, safe, and excellent are words that were commonly used to describe the service that we offer. This graph shows how important our service is to the clients that use it. To some of our clients, this service is a lifeline, which is a good news story in itself. Thank you.
So I'll just leave you with that last slide there, which is a selection of the comments from the survey. Does anyone have any questions?
Can I just say that we asked for this to come to us to give a bit more visibility to what you do so we have a better understanding. And this is another really good news story. And so that's, I put it to staff that we need to actually get this out into our channels for media as well. We might even take over TV3 when they get rid of it. But anyway, well done, you guys, and well done you for the work you've done. You've presented it brilliantly. Anyone else want to comment? Councillor?
Chairman, we've got no sound.
My apologies. Yeah, totally support this, Councillor Thurston, and I'm sure you do too. But I have some people with mobility scooters, you know, these old things, and I did not say old people use them, but people have to use mobility scooters. And to get from places like Kawerau and Poriki, which Whakatane is our central banking area now. Most of our services are in there. They have to use a bus, and to try and get a mobility scooter on a bus is pretty tough. But what I've seen, I went with one of these ladies one day, and the biggest issue is that the bus drives off with 2 or 3 people in the back of it, and there's 40 foot of nothingness where we could get rid of 20 seats out of it, and you could probably put 10 mobility scooters and mobility units in there. That's what I'm just saying. It's just to get, if we can get people to be using these things, but it's most important because the service to get, and a gentleman here will know what I'm talking about, getting into Whakatane and that is really, really important for people to do their business and that, and go to, we do have a service from Kawerau, for instance, that now that get people to the hospital and all the rest of it, but just the day-to-day banking and that sort of thing in Whakatane is a pretty tight question. So I'm just something to throw at you, Mike. You know, these great big gargantuan buses that we've seen. I just saw some nice ones out here that we actually asked for when the service was first done by the regional council in Kawerau. Well, that's what we wanted, that sort of service, not what we've got there now, that is just a waste of time and money and diesel, as far as I'm concerned. Just a comment. Thank you very much.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So again, I'll answer that question in reverse. In terms of for example, the on-demand buses, they do have, I think one of them has a hoist and is able to accommodate mobility scooters and wheelchairs and other things. So I think it's actually a really good point to raise around particularly buses that are traversing communities where there's a broad cross-section of the community and there's not a lot of options. So we've got some network reviews that are coming through, and I think that's the best time to consider it because it's an asset change, and the bus needs to change in order to accommodate that stuff. And I think that's the point where we can start to think about well, let's make this a better service going forward. So that's supposed to be happening in a short order. But from our perspective at the moment, I think this sort of data helps us drive that change, but it's not happening now. And that's when we review that service, that's when we can fold it into the dough.
I just hope we don't have to wait till 2028 to get rid of those buses before we come.
Well, just remember that the PTOM as it was, or GPS, previously, the ones when we set up the last Tauranga bus thing about 5 years ago, it is now, or 7 years ago, it might be. We were forced to have the bus sizes that was placed upon us as a requirement. We didn't have any say in the matter because the government of the day was wanting to standardise the fleets around the country so it could be flexible and
Sounds like, Chair, you were probably listening to an engineer or something that doesn't know about cutting a hole in the side of the bus.
Anyway, the new GPS, I think, is much more flexible. So I look forward to being much more flexible going forward as to what we do. Mr. Dennis.
Thank you, Chair. Just in regard to your figures for Whakatane, how much do you think that those figures have been affected by the fact that the Waka Eastern Bay Community Transport Project is starting to get up and running? And if I may, Chair, I'll just there's 5 points here they've asked me to mention, and it might help you answer that. As of the 28th of February, they had 103 registered passengers, of whom 74 passengers had a disability. The Mokotai funding expires at the end of this month, but I believe that through lotteries they've attracted a sizable chunk of money. They'll be applying be a pre-approved total mobility service provider as soon as Regional Council send out the RFIs, whatever they are. They currently run 2 vehicles, but have applied for a grant to Rabobank for a car to drive single passengers to Tauranga for specialist and hospital appointments. And the last one is they've also applied for a grant to purchase another mobility van with a full hoist, which will enable them to deliver services to Disability Resource Centre and Whakatane Hospital. So in regard to our friend's comments then, how much are we interlinking your services in Whakatane with Waka Eastern Bay, and how much are they affecting each other's statistics, and can we align the statistics together to give a better picture?
So through you, Chair, the answers that we got here were from our survey that went out to our total mobility clients. So some of those could be using the Waka Eastern Bay transport. We don't have a picture of that. We don't have any oversight at this stage. We certainly need more providers in Whakatane. We do realise that. We need more with hoist vehicles. And on a point with the hoist vehicles, obviously there's a weight limit. So the actual big total mobility scooters, the big mobility scooters can't actually go in a normal hoist vehicle. They have to have something bigger. Waka Eastern Bay are on our list of people to notify when our RFQs go out for contracts, which we aiming to have them all done by the end of May. So definitely they're there, and if they can meet all the criteria for being a total mobility transport operator, then they will be awarded a contract.
Right. So that concludes that one, and we just have the. Oh, we need to receive that report. I'm happy to move. We receive it. Seconded by councillor Dennis. All in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. And then we just move to the Tauranga Public Transport Joint Committee minutes on page 144. And what are we doing with these? We're just receiving them. So I'll move that we receive those. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Thurston, are you seconding that? Thank you. Saw that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Is there anything in there that anyone wants to discuss? Being not, we move on to the, I move that we go into public excluded.